In Say Cheese and Die, which is the 4th Goosebumps book in the original series, they supposedly touched on the origins to the evil camera, which is the main antagonist of that book. And so, really, I'm not going to get into too much details on, the origin story to the Say Cheese and Die camera, since I haven't warned for spoilers, but basically, it's sort of like a science experiment gone wrong sort of deal. And so, anyway, guys, I have a theory, though, that completely disproves those science experiment origins given in Say Cheese and Die. And actually, in this video, I'm going to try to prove that the Say Cheese and Die camera is actually a Grool from, sort of like the main antagonist from It Came From Beneath the Sink. But anyway, guys, before I continue on with that, spoiler warning for Say Cheese and Die, Say Cheese and Die Again, Say Cheese and Die Screaming, and also It Came From Beneath the Sink. If you've read all 4 of these books, then you should be fine to watch the video, but if you haven't, I would highly recommend you to not watch this video. But anyway, guys, with that out of the way, let's continue on to our theory. So, basically, the Say Cheese and Die's camera's origin, yeah, I said that wrong, I'm sorry, guys. The origin to the camera in Say Cheese and Die is, really quite simple. Basically, there's this nameless scientist who is creating a camera, and his assistant, whose name I believe is Spidey, wanted to take the camera and gain all the fame to himself, because this camera is actually going to be very high-tech, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the camera, when you take a picture of someone with it, will, basically predict the future. And so Spidey really wanted to take all the fame for himself, for creating the camera and stuff like that. So he attempted to take the camera, only for it to be cursed by that nameless scientist that I mentioned earlier. And so now, basically, whenever you take a picture of someone with the camera, it will create a future that is bad luck, sort of. Basically, if you take a picture of someone, then something bad will happen to them. In one case in the book, they took a picture of someone, and it didn't show the person on the photo, and then later on, that person disappeared. It's sort of like that. And so, that's really all there is to the Say Cheese and Die's camera's origin. That origin story for the camera really isn't my favorite. I like the origin story for the camera in Say Cheese and Die Again. Not Say Cheese and Die Again, I'm sorry guys. Say Cheese and Die Screaming. I think that's a whole lot more of an interesting origin story for the camera, because really the origin story to the camera in Say Cheese and Die is really not that, as cool and stuff like that as the one for the camera in Say Cheese and Die Again. It honestly kind of conflicts with the tone of the book, because in the book it's very dark. Like, there's very dark things going on here. Even someone dies near the end of the book. I mean, some very, very dark stuff. And then you have this origin story, which is a science experiment gone wrong. I mean, it fits for the Goosebumps books, especially more of the lighthearted, fun ones, like The Beast from the East or something like that. They're kind of weirder and stuff like that. But this book, is darker, and it doesn't really fit with that kind of tone of the book. It's honestly one of my least favorite parts of Say Cheese and Die. But despite that, that's the origins to the camera in Say Cheese and Die. The camera in Say Cheese and Die Again has different origins, like it was made for a movie or something like that. And this leads you to believe that the one in Say Cheese and Die and the one in Say Cheese and Die Screaming are completely different. And I'm going to get into more detail on that later on as a piece of evidence to prove my theory. But next, let's talk about the Grool, I believe, from It Came From Beneath the Sink. So basically, the Grool is a mythological creature that takes the form, usually, of a sponge, and it constantly causes bad luck to whoever owns it, and it feeds off of this bad luck. But if you're positive around the sponge and happy around it, no matter what it does, then you can easily defeat the grunge. Not the grunge, I'm so sorry. The drool. I'm so sorry, guys. The Grool. And so, that's really the details on the Grool. It's really not that, simple. It's really simple, honestly, and that's pretty much the Grool. I'm so sorry, guys. I'm having such a hard time pronouncing the Grool for some weird reason. I'm not really sure why. But that is the origins to both iconic Goosebumps monsters. And now it's time to prove my theory that both the Say Cheese and Die camera and the Grool are exactly the same. Okay, so first, before I prove that the Say Cheese and Die camera is exactly the same as the Grool. The Grool. I'm so sorry, guys. But, in order to do that, first, I need to disprove the origins made by Spidey in Say Cheese and Die. And so the first thing is the guy who told us the origins to the Say Cheese and Die camera seems slightly eccentric. I mean, he's a homeless person, sort of, that lives in this old house, and he's older, and he seems to be pretty crazy, and all that stuff. And so, it really seems like a huge piece of evidence that he could have just made up that story about the camera. Obviously, he knows that the camera can cause a bad future to whoever gets a picture of that thing. And so, but still, he seems to be a little crazy and stuff like that. So that could be used as a piece of evidence to disprove his statement of the origins to the camera. Also, there's another thing, and that is that he could have still made money off of the camera and stuff like that. Because basically the reason the camera's cursed in the first place is because he wanted to steal the camera and make a whole lot of money off of that camera. But there's a huge but here, and that is that, you know, he still wouldn't make money off of the cursed camera when you think about it. Because still, it's a camera that will cause a bad future to whoever it takes a picture of. I mean, someone would at least want that, and if you just gave it to the government, you know, like, had an experiment done on it, or anything like that, then he would make a whole lot of money off of that. After all, that's what he wanted in the first place, and he'd still make money off the camera even if it was cursed or not, because, you know, the military could use it to fight against their enemies, or, you know, he could just make up money off of this camera no matter what, especially if it causes a dark future to whoever it takes a picture of. And you could say he doesn't want anyone to get hurt with the camera, but after all, he did kidnap, you know, 2 children in order to keep the camera a secret, or attempted to at least. And also, you know, he attempted to steal the camera in the first place, meaning that he doesn't really seem to be all that caring about other people and stuff like that, and seems to be more concerned about himself due to him stealing the camera from the guy in the first place, and also he's willing to kidnap 2 children. So I don't really see him not using the camera to get fame and fortune and stuff like that. So I think that is a huge piece of evidence to disprove the fact that the Say Cheese and Die camera is actually has the origins that are stated in the book. And also another thing is that the technology of the time really shouldn't match with the, you know, time period of the camera, because they were going to make this revolutionary discovery with this camera, you know, and the fact that they could do that in the first place, and which supposedly seems like such a long time ago, is kind of strange. And also there's the fact that there's a second Say Cheese and Die camera and Say Cheese and Die Screaming. If this is just a one-in-a-kind camera, then how come there's 2 different ones? You could say that the nameless scientist created 2 of them, but why isn't he famous? You know what I mean? Obviously the camera that guy created, he could easily just recreate if he recreated the camera in Say Cheese and Die Screaming. And also, he would probably get a lot of fame and fortune for making a second camera, because obviously, he most likely, if he is a scientist, would take notes on how he made the camera. And so that means that he could just easily recreate one that is a normal camera and completely different from the cursed one that we see in Say Cheese and Die. And most likely, he would become very rich and stuff like that. So, after a long time about disproving the Say Cheese and Die camera's origins, I think I've gathered enough evidence to say that that is not the origins to the Say Cheese and Die camera. And so, what exactly is the camera's origins? And so, I think there's a lot of evidence to prove that this camera is the Grool from It Came From Beneath the Sink. Because, first off, both the camera and the drool seem to cause bad luck and feed off of it wherever they go. Because, just think about it, when you take pictures with the camera, you know, it's just causes bad luck to happen, just like the drool. It's almost identical to the drool in a couple of ways. You know, it is sort of different since that's the camera, and that looks more like and the Grool sort of looks more like a kitchen sponge. But, you know, both cause bad luck, and actually both seem to be alive. Obviously, the Grool from It Came From Beneath the Sink is alive due to it moving a lot of the time, and it also changes color, and also could supposedly change form. More on that in a second. So it is 100% alive until it was killed later on near the end of the book. And the camera from Say Cheese and Die also seems to be alive as well. I believe at certain points in the book, in some books, I cannot name an exact moment, but I'm pretty sure a lot of the times the camera from Say Cheese and Die can take a picture, you know, without anyone actually pressing the button. And also, I believe from one of the splat stats sort of thing from the Goosebumps Horrorland series and stuff, I believe in the reprint to Say Cheese and Die, they actually had a splat stat thing that said that the camera actually had an intelligence level. And the camera should be just an item, right? And how could it have intelligence if it's just an item? And so that is another huge piece of evidence to prove that the Say Cheese and Die camera is alive. Also, and I think Say Cheese and Die screaming at one point in the book, the camera seemed to be telling the main protagonist what to do, like, do not get rid of me and stuff like that. It was, like, not stated exactly, but it was sort of implied, like, it was just one short line from the book. I actually reread Say Cheese and Die screaming. Well, I'm currently rereading it right now, and I just remember that one line from the book that she felt like the camera is telling her not to do it. It's just a very brief and short line, so it's really not that important. Also, from the Say Cheese and Die Again Goosebumps episode, they had that sort of like, say cheese, say cheese, say cheese, you know, that thing. I can barely remember that from the episode, but it is definitely in there, and this could also imply that the camera is actually alive. But then there's this huge thing in the way from both of these items, or creatures, if you will, to be exactly the same, and that is the obvious thing, and that is the design. The Grool looks like a kitchen sponge, and the Say Cheese and Die camera looks like a camera. And the Grool is typically said to look like a sponge, so how could the Grool be, you know, I'm so sorry, guys, right now. How could that one be the evil camera from the Say Cheese and Die books if that one looks like a sponge and the evil camera looks like a camera? But this, I think, could easily be explained due to the Grool constantly changing colors in the book, depending on the bad luck and stuff like that. And so you can see in the book, though, in It Came From Beneath the Sink, the Grool constantly changes color and sort of changes shape. It moves and all that stuff. And sometimes is said to have eyes and teeth and stuff like that, which could possibly imply that, you know, it can change shape. And even if you take a look at one of the foreign covers to It Came From Beneath the Sink, you know, the Grool doesn't exactly look like a kitchen sponge, also possibly implying that it can change from another object to another object, you know, change from a sponge to another thing. But maybe the Grool likes it most as a sponge due to it causing bad things happening to it to unsuspecting people. If it was a camera, then it's a whole lot more obvious, you know, due to the camera predicting the future and stuff like that. Or the camera could also possibly be a cousin to the Grool. That is a possibility, because also in the book, there is the Lynx. And the Lynx is sort of this cousin to the Grool, and it could be the same case with the evil camera from Say Cheese and Die. And since there is multiple cameras from Say Cheese and Die, you could say that this is a whole entire species due to, you know, the Grool being seen in, like, 2 Goosebumps books, one Give Yourself Goosebumps book, and, you know, It Came From Beneath the Sink, and so there's 2 of those, at least, so there is a bunch of, you know, Grools from across the Goosebumps universe, and so if this is the case, then that could explain why there's multiple cameras. It's because they're Grools and they're all across the world, just like the sponge-like Grools. That is another possibility, and so that the cameras itself are a mythical creature, and that's why there's multiple of them that you see in, like, Say Cheese and Die Screaming and the Say Cheese and Die books. And it's pretty much confirmed in the books that they are completely different, you know, the camera from Say Cheese and Die and the camera from Say Cheese and Die Screaming. Because if you take a look at the end of the book, I think it said another evil camera appeared in, and then it said Say Cheese and Die. In the book, Say Cheese and Die Screaming. So, that is another huge piece of evidence since it said another one. So that means there's multiple, and since their origin story that's mentioned in Say Cheese and Die is most likely wrong, then that could mean that they are a species, sort of like the Grool, or exactly like them. But anyway, guys, that's the end of my video. This one's pretty long. It's 16 minutes and 47 seconds, so, you know, that's a pretty long video. But I hope you guys enjoyed, nevertheless, and comment down below what you guys think about this theory. Do you think the Say Cheese and Die camera is a Grool? Do you think it's like a cousin to the Grool, or something like that? Or do you think that the Say Cheese and Die's camera's origin from the book itself is correct, and this whole entire theory is wrong? But anyway, guys, comment down below what you guys think, and that is the end of my theory.